The sun had barely risen over the small town when the faint sound of a piano slipped out of a narrow window at the end of Maple Street. Inside that little house, a young girl sat at the old upright piano that once belonged to her father. Her fingers moved carefully across the keys, repeating the same section again and again until it finally sounded right. She wasn't just practicing, she was trying to feel the music the way he used to. Her name was Lila, and at 17 she had already spent more time at the piano than anywhere else. Music had always been her world, but she never imagined it would one day become a battlefield. That morning, she was preparing for the day she both dreamed of and feared, the first day of rehearsals for the annual concert at the Grand Ridge Academy of Music, the most prestigious school in the region. Getting into that academy had been a miracle. Her family didn't have much money, but her talent had earned her a partial scholarship, and her determination had carried her the rest of the way. She lived with her mother, who worked double shifts at the hospital. Every night before bed, her mother would peek into Lila's room, whisper, "Don't forget why you started," and smile softly before closing the door. Her father used to say the same thing before he passed away when she was 10. Those words became her anchor every time she sat down at the piano. At the academy, everything felt different. The students came from big cities and wealthy families. They wore expensive watches, carried shiny instruments, and talked about performing in Vienna or Paris one day. Lila, in her simple clothes and second-hand shoes, kept to herself. She didn't mind being quiet. She believed her music could speak for her. That belief was tested the moment she stepped into the rehearsal hall. The director, Mr. Alden, stood at the front, tall, strict, with silver hair and glasses that always seemed to catch the light. He was known for pushing his students to the edge of their limits and sometimes beyond. No one argued with him, not even the top performers. "Each of you will perform one piece at the showcase concert," he said firmly. "This is your opportunity to show not just skill but soul." He began assigning pieces one by one, calling out students' names and handing them sheets of music. The air buzzed with excitement as students whispered and compared selections. When it was finally Lila's turn, Mr. Alden didn't even look up from his clipboard. "Lila," he said, flipping a page, "you'll be performing Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 3. The room went silent. A few students exchanged shocked looks. Someone even let out a quiet gasp. Lila froze. She had heard of that piece. Everyone had. It was legendary, and not in a good way. Pianists called it The Mountain, a piece so demanding that even professionals avoided it unless they had months to prepare. Her heart sank. "Sir," she began softly, her voice shaking. "That piece is extremely difficult. I'm not sure I'm ready for it." Mr. Alden finally looked up, his expression unreadable. "You are a student of this academy, are you not?" "Yes, sir, but then you are ready to be challenged." His tone left no room for argument. "But others," he cut her off sharply. "Others are not you." The class was still watching. Lila felt her cheeks burn. She wanted to disappear. "Yes, sir," she whispered, clutching the sheet music tightly. When rehearsal ended, she stayed seated at the piano long after everyone else had left. Her friend Noah, a violinist who always had a calm way about him, lingered nearby. "That's a brutal piece," he said quietly. "Even the teachers don't touch that one." "I know," Lila murmured, staring down at the notes. They looked endless, like a forest of black dots and lines. "I don't think I can do it," he shrugged lightly. "Maybe that's why he gave it to you." "He thinks you can." Lila gave a small, humorless laugh. "Or he wants to see me fail." Noah didn't argue. He knew how harsh Mr. Alden could be. "Just take it one page at a time," he said. "You've got more heart than anyone here. Don't lose that." That night she sat at her piano again. The house was quiet except for the faint ticking of the old clock on the wall. She placed the sheet music in front of her and began to play the opening. It was beautiful but overwhelming. The melody soared high, dipped low, twisted through impossible chords. Her hands trembled as she tried to keep up. After 10 minutes, she stopped, tears stinging her eyes. "This isn't me," she whispered, but then she remembered her mother's voice. "Don't forget why you started." So she took a deep breath and tried again. Slowly, painfully, she began to understand the first few measures. The music wasn't just hard, it was alive. It demanded strength, emotion, and honesty. Days turned into weeks. Every morning before school, she practiced until her hands ached. After classes, she stayed behind in the music room. sometimes until the janitor turned off the lights. Other students began to notice her exhaustion. Some whispered that she was wasting her time. One afternoon, she overheard two girls talking near the lockers. "She's never going to pull it off," one said. "Rachmaninoff, please. Even professionals crash on that." "She should have asked for something simpler," the other replied. "She's trying to prove something." Lila walked past them without a word, but their voices followed her all the way to the practice room. She sat at the piano and placed her hands on the keys, but her mind was too full of doubt to play. What if they were right? What if Mr. Alden had given her this piece not to help her grow, but to expose her limits? She looked at her reflection in the polished black surface of the piano. Tired eyes, trembling fingers, and a heart that felt too heavy to carry. That night, at dinner, her mother noticed. "You look pale," she said, setting down her fork. "Are you pushing yourself too hard?" Lila forced a smile. "Just a lot of work at school." Her mother reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "You've always had big dreams, but don't let them crush you. Music should lift you, not break you." Lila nodded, but she couldn't stop thinking about the word break. The next morning, Mr. Alden asked to see her after class. She walked into his office nervously, clutching her notebook. "Sit," he said. "How is your progress?" "I'm trying, sir," she replied carefully. "It's difficult, but I'm learning." He studied her for a moment, then said, "Do you know why I gave you that piece?" Lila hesitated. "Because you think I need to be challenged?" He shook his head slightly. "Because you play with feeling. Most of the others play notes. You play emotions, but emotions are not enough. You must learn to control them. This piece will teach you that, if you survive it." "Survive it," she repeated under her breath. He didn't smile. "Yes, because this music will not forgive weakness. Either you conquer it or it will swallow you." Lila left the office with her heart pounding. His words sounded more like a warning than encouragement. From that day on, she practiced even harder. The music room became her second home. Her hands developed blisters and her eyes burned from lack of sleep. Some nights she fell asleep at the piano, her fingers still resting on the keys. Still, every time she thought about quitting, she saw her mother's tired face, her father's memory, and Noah's quiet belief in her. Weeks passed and the concert date drew closer. She could now play through half the piece without stopping, though not without mistakes. Each time she stumbled, frustration bubbled inside her, but she forced herself to keep going. Then came the first full rehearsal. The orchestra was there, the stage lights were on, and Mr. Alden sat in the front row with his notebook open. Lila's heart hammered in her chest as she took her seat at the grand piano. Her fingers hovered over the keys. "Begin," Mr. Alden said. The first few notes were shaky, but she found her rhythm. The orchestra joined in, their sound swelling around her like a wave. For a moment she felt it, the magic, the connection, the reason she loved music. But then halfway through the second movement, her fingers slipped. A wrong note echoed loudly, then another. Panic spread. She tried to recover, but her mind went blank. The music stopped. The hall fell silent. Mr. Alden closed his notebook. "That will be all for today," he said coldly. Lila's hands trembled. She couldn't move. She could feel everyone's eyes on her, their silence sharper than words. She stood slowly, her heart sinking, and walked off the stage without looking back. Outside, the wind was cold. She sat on the steps, holding her sheet music tightly against her chest, trying not to cry. She had never felt so small, so powerless. For the first time, she wondered if maybe she didn't belong there after all. But deep inside, a faint whisper stirred. Her mother's voice, her father's song, her own heartbeat, reminding her that even broken notes still made music. The next few days were heavy for Lila. After the failed rehearsal, something inside her had gone quiet. The piano, which had always felt like her closest friend, now seemed like a stranger sitting in her room. Every time she looked at the keys, she remembered the silence that followed her mistake. The memory felt louder than any sound she could make. At the academy, people didn't say much about it, but their glances said enough. Some gave her small smiles of sympathy. Others looked away quickly as if her failure might rub off on them. Only Noah stayed the same. He still walked beside her to class, still offered to carry her books, and still spoke to her as if nothing had changed. That was something she was grateful for, even if she didn't know how to say it. Mr. Alden, on the other hand, didn't call her in for a talk. didn't say a word about the rehearsal. It almost felt worse than if he had shouted at her. The silence made her wonder if he had already given up on her. At home, her mother noticed the change right away. Lila came home late, ate little, and went to bed without saying much. The house, usually filled with soft piano notes, stayed silent. One night, her mother knocked on her door and came in quietly. "Sweetheart," she said, sitting at the edge of the bed. "You've been so quiet lately." "What's going on?" Lila looked up from her blanket. "I messed up, Mom, at rehearsal. Everyone saw it." Her mother's face softened. "You think that makes you a failure?" "It felt like it," Lila whispered. "I practiced so hard and I still froze." Her mother reached for her hand. "You're not supposed to be perfect, Lila. You're supposed to keep trying. That's what makes you stronger." Lila wanted to believe her, but it wasn't that simple. The concert was only a few weeks away, and every time she tried to play, her hands shook. She couldn't stop hearing that wrong note in her head. The next morning, she went to class early and sat in the back of the piano room, listening to others play. Their confidence both amazed and hurt her. How did they make it look so easy? When Noah came in, he found her staring at the floor. "You're not giving up, are you?" he asked softly. She shook her head. "No, but I don't know how to keep going." He smiled gently. "Then don't think about keeping going. Just think about playing one note at a time." Later that day, Mr. Alden called for a group meeting. He spoke about stage presence, discipline, and control. Lila tried to take notes, but her mind was far away. When the class ended and everyone filed out, he stopped her with a gesture. "Lila," he said. "Stay a moment." Her heart pounded as she approached his desk. "Yes, sir?" He studied her face for a long second before speaking. "You let fear take control during rehearsal." She lowered her eyes. "I know, I'm sorry." "This isn't about being sorry," he said. "It's about understanding what fear does to you. It freezes you because you care too much about the outcome. Stop chasing perfection. Play to express, not to impress." Lila looked up, surprised. His tone was softer than she expected. "You think I can still do it?" He didn't answer directly. "You were chosen for a reason. Now prove that reason wasn't a mistake." That night, she sat down at the piano again. For a long time, she didn't play. She just stared at the sheet music, running her fingers gently along the keys. Then she began playing very slowly, not worrying about speed or accuracy, just sound. The melody filled the room like a slow breath. For the first time since their rehearsal, she felt calm. It became her new routine. Every evening after finishing homework, she'd play quietly, focusing on feeling instead of perfection. It didn't sound like a performance, it sounded like a conversation. Little by little, her confidence began to return. One night, as she was playing, she heard a soft noise from the hallway. When she turned, she saw her mother standing there smiling. "That's the Lila I know," she said. "You sound like you again." Lila smiled back. It wasn't much, but it felt like the start of something new. At school, she noticed a change too. Her playing was still far from perfect, but there was more life in it now. Mr. Alden didn't compliment her, but he didn't criticize her either, and from him. That was a good sign. Still, the pressure was growing. The concert was just 2 weeks away. Posters were going up around the school. Students were talking excitedly about who might win scholarships and who might catch the judge's attention. Lila tried not to think about that part. She just wanted to make it through without breaking again. Noah noticed her nerves and decided to help in his own quiet way. After class, he invited her to a small practice room on the top floor, where hardly anyone went. "It's quieter here," he said. "No one will listen or judge." They practiced there every afternoon. Sometimes he'd play the violin softly while she worked through a section of her piece. The sound of the two instruments together filled the empty room like sunlight. She didn't feel alone anymore. "Why are you helping me so much?" she asked one evening as they packed up. He smiled. "Because I like hearing you play. You remind people what music is supposed to feel like." Those words stayed with her. For the first time in weeks, she didn't dread practice. She looked forward to it. Slowly, the piece began to take shape, still imperfect but beautiful in its own way. Then came the mock performance. It was a smaller rehearsal held in front of a few teachers to test progress. Lila's heart raced as she sat down at the piano again. She took a deep breath and remembered what Mr. Alden had said, "Play to express, not to impress." She began playing, this time without fear. The notes weren't flawless, but they were full of feeling. When she finished, the room stayed quiet for a few seconds. Then one of the teachers said softly, "That was lovely." Mr. Alden simply nodded and wrote something in his notebook. But Lila could tell from the faint look in his eyes that maybe, just maybe, she was starting to earn back his trust. Walking home that evening, the world felt different. The air was cool, and the sky was painted with soft colors. She stopped at the small bridge near her house and leaned against the railing, looking down at the water. She thought about how far she still had to go, but also about how far she had come. Maybe failure wasn't the end, and maybe it was just part of the journey. Over the next few days, she practiced with new energy. Every mistake became a lesson, every wrong note a reminder that progress came slowly. Her mother began to notice the change in her too. The way she walked a little taller, smiled a little more. One evening, while she was deep in practice, her mother brought her a cup of tea. "You know," she said gently, "your father used to struggle with pieces too. He said the hard ones were the ones that taught him who he really was." Lila looked up. "Did he ever want to quit?" "Of course," her mother said, "but he didn't. And that's why people remembered his music." Those words stayed in Lila's heart. Every time she felt tired or scared, she thought of her father sitting at the same piano, fighting his own battles through music. It made her feel less alone. Soon the final rehearsal arrived. The concert was only a few days away. The students gathered in the auditorium, tuning instruments and whispering nervously. When it was Lila's turn, she sat at the piano, hands steady. This time she wasn't thinking about failure. She was thinking about her father, her mother, and the long nights that brought her here. She began to play. The notes flowed smoothly, not perfect, but filled with heart. When she finished, there was no silence this time, just a quiet sense of peace. Even Mr. Alden gave a small nod of approval. As she packed up her sheet music, Noah grinned at her. "See, one note at a time," he said. She laughed softly. "Yeah, one note at a time." That night, walking home under the streetlights, she realized something. She wasn't afraid of the concert anymore. She knew it would be hard, and maybe she'd make mistakes again. But that didn't matter. What mattered was that she had found her way back to the reason she started. And that reason was enough to keep her playing. The week of the concert arrived faster than Lila expected. The halls of the academy buzzed with excitement. Students carried their instruments everywhere, tuning and rehearsing in every corner. Posters for the annual showcase hung on every wall, each one reminding her that soon she'd be on that stage again, in front of hundreds of people. Every time she saw her name printed next to the words, Rachmaninoff Concerto No. 3, her stomach tightened. On the surface, she seemed calm, but inside, her nerves were tangled. She practiced every day, morning to night, polishing small sections until they felt like second nature. But no matter how hard she worked, a quiet fear followed her. The memory of that failed rehearsal, the sound of that wrong note, the silence afterward. It haunted her like an echo she couldn't turn off. Noah tried to keep her spirits up. He brought snacks to her practice sessions, told bad jokes, and even made funny faces from behind the piano lid when she looked too serious. Sometimes she laughed, but other times she couldn't shake the weight pressing down on her. This concert wasn't just about music anymore. It was about proving to herself that she belonged there. The night before the big event, she stayed at the academy late. The janitor was mopping the hallway when he noticed her sitting alone in the rehearsal room. "Still at it?" he asked kindly. She smiled faintly. "Just one more time," he chuckled. "You've played that piece 100 times already. Don't wear yourself out. I'm just scared I'll mess up," she admitted. The janitor leaned on his mop handle and said quietly, "You know, the best performances aren't the ones without mistakes. They're the ones with heart. People remember how you make them feel, not how many notes you get right." His words were simple, but they stayed with her. She went home that night and sat by her window looking at the stars. The world felt quiet, almost peaceful. She took a deep breath and whispered, "I just want to play with heart." The next morning, sunlight streamed through her curtains. It was concert day. Her mother made her breakfast, though neither of them said much. The tension hung in the air like an unspoken truth. Before leaving, her mother hugged her tightly. "No matter what happens," she said softly, "I'm already proud of you." At the academy, everything felt electric. Students were dressed in black formal clothes, tuning their instruments and whispering in nervous excitement. Backstage, the sound of violins warming up mixed with the deep hum of cellos. The air was thick with anticipation. When it was almost her turn, Lila felt her heart pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. Her hands were cold, her throat dry. She closed her eyes and tried to remember why she was doing this. For her father, for her mother, for herself. She took one last deep breath before stepping onto the stage. The bright lights hit her face as she walked to the piano. The audience was a blur, hundreds of faces watching, waiting. The orchestra behind her waited for her cue. Mr. Alden sat in the front row, his expression unreadable. She sat down, adjusted her seat, and placed her hands on the keys. For a moment she didn't move. The hall was completely silent. Then she began to play. The opening notes came out soft, trembling slightly, but soon found their rhythm. The orchestra joined in, and together they filled the hall with a sound so rich it seemed to shake the air. Every measure carried her further into the music, pulling her into a world where nothing else existed. Her hands moved instinctively, the melody flowing through her like water. Halfway through the first movement, something unexpected happened. One of the piano keys stuck for a split second, just long enough to throw her off. Her heart skipped. Panic threatened to rise, but she caught herself. She remembered what Noah had told her, one note at a time. She kept playing. The audience didn't even notice, but she did, and that made every note afterward feel like walking on thin ice. Still, she kept going, her focus sharpened, her body moving with the rhythm. The second movement was softer, more emotional, like a whispered confession. She played it as if speaking directly to her father, as if every note carried a piece of her heart. She could feel her mother in the crowd, could almost hear her father's favorite tune hidden inside the music. It gave her strength. When the final movement began, her hands trembled again, but not from fear this time, from power. The piece demanded everything she had: speed, control, emotion. Her fingers flew across the keys, the orchestra swelling behind her in waves of sound. It was chaos and beauty all at once. And then, just before the final passage, her mind went blank. For one terrifying second, she forgot what came next. Her fingers hovered midair. The hall seemed to freeze. But then she heard Noah's words again in her head. You remind people what music is supposed to feel like. She took a shaky breath, closed her eyes, and trusted her heart. The next note came naturally, then the next, and suddenly the music returned, stronger, fuller, alive. She played as if the piano itself was breathing with her. The final chord rang out, rich and deep, echoing through the hall like a heartbeat. Silence followed. Not the awkward, painful silence of failure, but the kind that fills a room when something extraordinary has happened. Lila sat there, her chest rising and falling, her hands trembling over the keys. For a long moment, no one moved. Then the applause began. It started softly, then grew louder until the entire hall was on its feet. The sound washed over her like a wave. She blinked back tears, unsure if this was real. She turned slightly and saw Mr. Alden stand, not smiling but clapping slowly, deliberately. That was enough. Her mother stood in the crowd too, hands over her heart, eyes shining. Lila felt her throat tighten. She bowed deeply, trying not to cry, but a few tears slipped down anyway. When she walked off the stage, Noah was waiting just behind the curtain. You did it, he said, grinning from ear to ear. That was incredible, she laughed, half crying. I thought I was going to forget everything in the middle. You didn't. You let go. And that's what made it beautiful. Mr. Alden appeared a moment later. For a second, she thought he might scold her for the hesitation, but instead he simply said, That was honest. Honest? She repeated, confused. He nodded. Music is truth. You played yours. Those words hit her harder than any praise could. She realized he had never wanted perfection from her. He wanted authenticity. And tonight, she had given it. After the concert ended, students gathered backstage, buzzing with excitement. Some congratulated her. Others asked how she managed such a difficult piece. She smiled shyly and said, Just one note at a time. It became her quiet mantra, a reminder of everything she had gone through to reach that moment. Later, when everyone had gone home and the lights were dimmed, she sat alone at the piano one last time. The hall was empty, but she played a few soft notes anyway. They echoed through the quiet space, warm and gentle. She thought about her father, how proud he would have been, and about her mother waiting outside with tears in her eyes. For the first time, Lila didn't feel like she was chasing perfection anymore. She just felt free. She knew there would be more challenges ahead, more performances, maybe even more failures. But now she understood something important. Music wasn't about getting everything right. It was about telling the truth of who you are. As she packed her music sheets and turned off the light, she glanced once more at the grand piano. A small smile crossed her face. "Thank you," she whispered, not sure if she was talking to the instrument, her father, or herself. Outside, the night was cool and quiet. Her mother and Noah were waiting near the steps. Her mother hugged her tightly. "You were amazing," she said. Lila smiled through her tears. "I didn't play it perfectly." Her mother laughed softly. "You didn't need to. You played beautifully." As they walked home together, the streetlights glowed softly above them. The world felt peaceful, like the music was still following her somehow, humming quietly in the air. She held her sheet music close, knowing this was only the beginning of her journey. A journey not of perfection, but of passion, courage, and heart. The days after the concert felt like a dream to Lila. Everyone at the academy seemed to look at her differently now. Students who had once ignored her smiled in the hallways. Some even stopped to tell her how much her performance had moved them. It was strange hearing praise from people who used to whisper behind her back. She didn't know how to react, so she just smiled and said thank you. Mr. Alden didn't say much after the concert, but one afternoon as she was leaving class, he called out to Hare. "Lila," he said, his tone softer than usual. "That night you showed something most never learn, that music isn't about perfection. It's about honesty. Don't lose that." She nodded, not trusting herself to speak. It was the closest thing to a compliment she had ever received from him, and she would remember it forever. Life slowly returned to normal, though something inside her had changed. She didn't play just to prove herself anymore. She played because she loved it. Her fingers seemed to move differently now, freer, lighter, more certain of their purpose. Even her mother noticed it. "You sound happier," she said one evening as she listened from the kitchen. "Like the music smiling back at you?" Lila laughed. "Maybe it is, but as peaceful as things seemed, a new challenge soon appeared, something she hadn't expected. One morning, Mr. Alden announced that the academy had been invited to perform at a charity gala in the city, a huge event attended by famous musicians and sponsors. Only 3 students would be chosen to represent the school. The announcement sent a wave of excitement through the class. This wasn't just another performance. It was a chance to be seen by the world beyond the academy walls. Mr. Alden listed the first 2 names easily, both senior students known for their skill. Then he paused. "For the final performer," he said, looking up from his paper, "Lila." The room fell silent. A few surprised murmurs rippled through the students. Lila felt her pulse quicken. She hadn't expected this. She looked up in shock. "Me, sir?" "Yes," he replied simply. "You've earned it." The words sent a rush of warmth through her, mixed with nerves. Performing again, in front of strangers, critics, and professionals, it was exciting and terrifying all at once. That afternoon, she sat in the practice room staring at the piano. This time the piece wasn't assigned. She was free to choose what she wanted to play. It was a small freedom, but it meant a lot. She thought carefully for a long time, flipping through sheet music, searching for something that felt right. Then here he stopped on a handwritten piece tucked between old books, one of her father's unfinished compositions. The notes were faded, the melody incomplete, but the moment she saw it, she knew what she wanted to do. She decided to finish it, to complete what her father had started. For the next 2 weeks, she worked quietly on the piece every evening after class. It was different from anything she had played before, simple, emotional, and deeply personal. Each note felt like a thread connecting her to him. Sometimes she'd close her eyes while playing and imagine his hands guiding her in the keys. Noah noticed the change in her. "You're working on something new," he said one afternoon when he walked into the practice room. "It sounds different, more personal." "It's my father's," she said softly. "Well, it was. I'm trying to finish it," he smiled. "Then it's going to be special." As the days passed, she began to realize that this wasn't just a performance. It was a way of saying goodbye, of healing something that had stayed broken for years. Her father had been her first teacher, her first inspiration. When he passed away, a part of her music had gone quiet too. But now, with every note she wrote, it was like she was talking to him again. Her mother found out one evening when she walked into her room. "You're playing your father's music," she said quietly, tears in her eyes. "He'd be so proud." Lila smiled. "I hope so." The night of the charity gala arrived quickly. The event was held in a grand hall filled with chandeliers, soft lights, and elegantly dressed guests. Lila's heart raced as she walked through the crowd with the other performers. She could hear laughter, the clinking of glasses, and the faint hum of conversation. It was nothing like the academy. This was the real world of music, polished and intimidating. Backstage, she sat at the piano bench, breathing slowly to calm herself. She looked at the sheet musicone last time, her father's handwriting mixed with her own, and smiled. For the first time, she didn't feel fear. She felt gratitude. When her turn came, she stepped out into the soft light of the stage. The audience quieted immediately. She sat down, placed her fingers on the keys, and began to play. The first notes were gentle, almost like a whisper. The melody told a story of love, loss, and hope. Itrosin fell like the rhythm of a heartbeat, carrying with it every emotion she had locked away for years. Halfway through the piece, she added her own section, soft, bright, full of life, her way of finishing what her father had started. It wasn't just music. It was a conversation across time. When she finished, there was silence again. That same heavy silence she had felt before at the academy. Then slowly, the applause began. Warm, heartfelt, genuine. People stood. Some wiped their eyes. It wasn't just her playing that had moved them, it was her honesty. As she bowed, she caught sight of her mother standing near the back, smiling through tears. Mr. Alden was there too, arms crossed, but his eyes held a quiet pride. Even Noah, who had sneaked into the audience, was grinning from ear to ear. Backstage, several people approached her, praising her performance, asking where the piece came from. She simply said, "It was my father's." One of the organizers, a kind older woman, touched her shoulder. "You brought something real to that stage," she said softly. "Don't ever lose that." Later that night, as they drove home, her mother reached over and held her hand. "You know," she said, "you didn't just play for your father tonight. You played for yourself too." Lila looked out the window at the glowing city lights. "Yeah," she whispered. "I think I did." The following week at the academy, things felt calmer. Lila didn't rush to practice as often anymore. Not because she cared less, but because she finally felt content. She had learned something that couldn't be found in any music book, that art comes from life, from loss, from love. One afternoon, she walked past an empty classroom and heard a young student struggling through a simple piece. The girl's face was scrunched in frustration. Lila smiled and walked in. "Mind if I help?" she asked. The girl nodded shyly. Lila sat beside her and played the section slowly, showing her how to feel the rhythm instead of forcing it. When the girl finally got it right, her eyes lit up. "That sounded beautiful," she said excitedly. "It did," Lila agreed. "Remember, don't just play the notes. Tell a story." The girl nodded, smiling, and Lila felt something warm bloom inside her. Maybe she thought this was what her father had meant when he taught her years ago, that music wasn't about being the best. It was about passing something on. That evening, she returned to her small house and sat at the piano one more time. The old keys felt familiar under her fingers. She didn't play her father's song or Rachmaninoff or anything from her classes. She just played freely, letting the notes drift and dance however they wanted. The sound filled the room and floated out the window, blending with the soft wind outside. Her mother walked in quietly and leaned against the doorframe, smiling. "You've found your sound," she said softly. Lila looked up and smiled back. "I think I have." The night grew darker, but she kept playing. Not for the applause, not for the judges, but for the love of it. Every note carried a piece of her journey, every melody a piece of her heart. And for the first time in a long while, she felt completely free. The morning of the Academy's final concert arrived with a strange mix of nerves and calm inside Lila. It was hard to explain, but she felt lighter than before. Months of hard work, fear, and discovery had led to this moment. She knew it wasn't about proving herself anymore. It was about expressing everything she had carried inside her heart. This was the biggest event of the year, where parents, critics, and music lovers gathered to see the most talented students perform. The hall was enormous, lined with velvet seats, and filled with quiet anticipation. When she walked through the main doors, carrying her sheet music, she felt the air hum with energy. Students whispered nervously, some pacing back and forth. Her friend Noah spotted her and smiled. "You ready?" he asked. She nodded, smiling back. "As ready as I'll ever be." "Don't overthink it," he said, trying to ease her nerves. "Just do what you always do. Play from your heart." That advice echoed in her mind all morning. As rehearsals went on, she watched others perform. Some were brilliant, others struggled. But she didn't feel the same fear she once had. Instead, she admired them, feeling connected in a quiet way. They were all chasing the same thing, to be understood through music. Hours passed. By evening, the hall began to fill. The soft chatter of the audience, the rustle of programs, and the sound of instruments being tuned filled the air. Lila sat backstage, her hands folded in her lap. Her heart thumped gently, not from panic but from excitement. When her name was announced, a hush fell over the hall. She took a deep breath, smoothed her dress, and stepped into the light. The grand piano waited for her under the warm glow of stage lamps. It looked beautiful, calm and strong, like an old friend. She sat down, adjusted the bench, and placed her fingers on the keys. For a moment, she closed her eyes. In her mind, she saw her father smiling at her from their small living room. She saw her mother standing in the back, her eyes full of pride. And she saw herself, the scared girl who once wanted to give up, now sitting here ready to face the world. Then she began to play. The opening notes were soft, gentle, almost shy. The audience leaned forward as the sound filled the room. The melody grew slowly, flowing like a river. Each note told a story, her story. The struggles, the lonely nights of practice, the tears she had shed, the love she had found for her father's music. It was all there, hidden between the harmonies. The hall stayed silent except for the piano. Even the faintest creak of a chair or rustle of fabric seemed to vanish. Her fingers moved naturally now, no longer chasing perfection. They knew where to go, what to feel. The music didn't come from her hands anymore. It came from somewhere deeper, her soul. As she reached the middle section, she played a part that she had rewritten herself. A section that was bright, alive, and hopeful. It was her way of saying that she had found peace. That life, no matter how difficult, could still be beautiful. The notes shimmered and danced through the hall, wrapping everyone in warmth. Then came the final passage, the part she feared the most when she first started learning the piece. It was fast, emotional, demanding. But tonight it didn't scare her. It felt natural, like breathing. Her hands moved with strength and grace. She was no longer just a student performing a piece. She was a young woman telling the world who she truly was. When the last note faded, the silence was deep and full. Lila sat still, her fingers resting on the keys. The sound seemed to linger in the air even after the piano had gone quiet. For a brief second, she wondered if anyone would clap. But then the applause erupted. It was loud, full of emotion, rising like a wave. People stood clapping, cheering, even shouting her name. Lila's chest tightened, tears forming in her eyes. She stood and bowed, trying to smile through the overwhelming emotion. She spotted her mother in the audience, clapping with tears on her face. Mr. Alden, who rarely showed emotion, gave her a small nod of approval from the judges' table. And Noah was grinning proudly from backstage. As she left the stage, several students hugged her. Some said her performance had made them cry. Others told her it inspired them to keep going. She didn't know what to say, she just smiled, feeling grateful. For the first time, she realized her music had touched people, and that was all she had ever wanted. Later, when the concert ended and the crowd began to leave, she walked alone through the empty hall. The lights were dimming and the air felt calm again. She ran her fingers gently along the edge of the piano. It felt warm, almost alive. She whispered, "Thank you," as if the piano could hear her. Mr. Alden walked in quietly. "You played beautifully tonight," he said. "Thank you," she replied softly. He looked at her for a moment, then added, "You reminded everyone why we play music in the first place. Not for medals, not for applause, but for meaning." She nodded, and he smiled faintly before walking away. When she finally stepped outside, the night air was cool against her face. The stars were bright above the academy, and the city lights shimmered in the distance. Her mother was waiting by the car. She wrapped her arms around Lila and whispered, I'm so proud of you. Lila hugged her tightly. I couldn't have done it without you. As they drove home, the radio played softly. Lila leaned her head against the window, watching the blurred lights pass by. Her hands still tingled from the performance, but her heart felt steady. She didn't need to win any prize. The feeling she had on that stage and that connection, that peace, and was worth more than anything else. Over the next few days, people kept talking about her performance. The Academy's website even posted a short article about it. Messages came in from students and teachers saying how moving it had been. But Lila didn't let it change her. She went back to her quiet routines, attending classes, practicing, and sometimes helping younger students when she could. One afternoon, she found Noah sitting at the piano room. "You were amazing that night," he said. "I don't think anyone will forget it," she laughed. "I was terrified the whole time." "You didn't look it," he said. "You looked like you belonged there." That made her smile. Maybe she thought she finally did. As the semester went on, Lila began to take on more mentorship roles. She helped new students prepare for their first recitals, teaching them to focus on expression instead of perfection. Her calm, kind presence made them trust her. Slowly, she became a quiet inspiration around the academy, not because she was the best, but because she understood what it meant to play from the heart. One day, after class, a shy first-year student approached her. "Can I ask you something?" The girl said. "How did you stop being scared to play in front of people?" Lila smiled gently. "I didn't stop being scared," she said. "I just stopped letting it control me." "The fear means you care. Use it," the girl nodded, thinking deeply. "Thank you." Lila watched her walk away, realizing how much she had changed. The girl she used to be, nervous, unsure, full of doubt, would never have imagined standing here giving advice to someone else. That evening, she stayed back in the practice room after everyone left. The sun was setting outside, casting golden light through the windows. She sat at the piano and began to play again. Not her father's piece this time, but something entirely her own. The melody was soft and peaceful, carrying everything she had learned. It was the sound of growth, of finding herself. She smiled to herself as she played, knowing this was just the beginning. There would be more challenges, more performances, more moments of doubt, but she wasn't afraid anymore. She had found her way. When the last note faded, she sat still for a while, listening to the quiet. Then she whispered, "Thank you, Dad," and smiled through her tears. The room was empty, but she felt surrounded by memories, by music, by love. The journey that had started with fear had ended in peace, and in that quiet moment, Lila knew that whatever came next, she was ready to face it. The morning after the concert felt different. The world outside seemed quieter, softer somehow. Lila woke up early, not because she had to, but because her heart was still full from the night before. The sound of applause still echoed in her ears. Every time she closed her eyes, she could see the faces in the crowd, the smiles, the tears, the warmth. It didn't feel real yet. Her mother was already in the kitchen, humming softly while making breakfast. When Lila walked in, she looked up and smiled. "You slept late," she said gently. Lila laughed, rubbing her eyes. "I guess I finally relaxed." Her mother placed a plate in front of her. "You earned it. Last night was something special. I don't think anyone there will forget it." Lila smiled quietly, taking a bite of toast. The words still felt unreal. She had spent so much of her life worrying about being good enough, and now she finally felt free from that weight. The concert wasn't about winning. It had been about connection, about expressing something that words could never say. After breakfast, she went to her piano. The sunlight spilled across the keys, warm and golden. She sat down and pressed a few soft notes, letting them drift into the quiet morning. For the first time, she didn't have to practice for a performance or to impress anyone. She could just play for herself. It felt peaceful, like breathing. That afternoon, she visited the academy. The building felt empty now, the echo of the concert still lingering in there. Some of the students were cleaning up decorations, still talking excitedly about the night before. When Lila walked in, they waved to her. A few came over just to say how much her performance had meant to them. Their kindness made her blush, but it also made her proud. She walked into the main hall and found Mr. Alden at the piano, sorting through some sheet music. He looked up as she entered. "Ah, Lila," he said with a small smile. "I was hoping I'd see you," she smiled. "I just wanted to thank you for pushing me." He chuckled softly. You didn't need much pushing in the end. You found your way, Lila nodded. I think I finally understand what you meant all along. That music has to come from truth. He studied her for a moment, then said quietly, and you played your truth. That's something few people ever manage. I'm proud of you. It was a simple thing to say, but coming from him, it meant everything. Lila thanked him and left the hall feeling lighthearted. For so long, she had looked up to Mr. Alden as someone she could never please. Now she realized he had been guiding her toward something deeper all along. In the weeks that followed, life began to move at a gentle pace again. Classes resumed, new students arrived, and the academy buzzed with fresh energy. Lila still practiced, but it was different now. She didn't play to chase perfection. She played to feel, to express, to share. Music had become her language, her way of understanding the world. One afternoon, she received a letter from the City Music Foundation. They had seen her performance at the charity gala and wanted to offer her a chance to perform at a youth concert series that summer. It wasn't a competition. It was an opportunity to perform for children, families, and people who didn't always have access to classical music. When she told her mother, her eyes filled with tears. Your father would be so proud, she said softly. He always believed you'd use your gift to touch hearts. Lila smiled and hugged her. I hope I can. As the summer concert approached, Lila practiced with renewed purpose. She didn't choose the hardest piece or the most famous one. Instead, she decided to perform her father's composition again, the one she had finished for him. It felt right, like closing a circle. The day of the performance arrived with warm sunshine and a gentle breeze. The concert was held outdoors in a park, with families sitting on blankets and children running around. It wasn't fancy or grand like the Academy Hall, but it felt alive, full of real people, real laughter, real life. Lila loved it immediately. When it was her turn to play, she sat at the small stage piano and looked out at the crowd. There were no critics here, no judges, just people who came to listen. She smiled and began to play. The melody flowed easily, carried by the wind. Children stopped running and turned to listen. Parents smiled and held each other's hands. Even the birds seemed to quiet down for a moment. The music filled the open air like sunlight, warm, bright, and honest. It wasn't perfect, but it was full of heart. When she finished, the audience clapped cheerfully, and a few children even shouted, "Play again!" She laughed, feeling her heart swell with joy. For the first time, she understood what it meant to truly share music, not just perform it. After the concert, she spent time talking with people. One older man came up to her and said, "My wife used to play the piano. Your music reminded me of her." "Thank you." Lila's throat tightened and she smiled softly. "I'm glad it meant something to you." Moments like that stayed with her. They reminded her why she loved music, because it could reach people in ways words never could. That night when she returned home, she went straight to her piano again. She didn't turn on the lights. She just sat in the quiet glow of the moon and played softly. Each note seemed to carry a memory of her father, of her mother's sacrifices, of the academy, of the moments she almost gave up and the people who helped her find her way back. The next few months were full of small joys. She began helping younger students at the academy, teaching them not just technique but feeling. She told them, "Don't chase the perfect sound, chase the truth in the sound." And they listened, just as she once had. Noah still came by often to practice, though now their sessions were full of laughter instead of nerves. He was preparing for his own big performance, and she helped him whenever she could. Sometimes they would stay late after everyone else had left, playing duets just for fun. Those evenings were her favorite. Music, friendship, and peace. One day, Mr. Alden announced that he was retiring. The news surprised everyone. During his final speech, he mentioned Lila's performance as one of the most memorable moments of his career. She felt her eyes sting with tears as the students gave him a standing ovation. Afterward, he approached her and said, "Keep teaching others what you've learned. That's how music lives on." She promised she would. Years passed slowly, gently. Lila continued to grow as a musician and teacher. Her performances were known for their sincerity, not their showiness. People often said they felt something real when she played, even if they couldn't explain what it was. And that was exactly what she wanted. Not fame, but connection. One evening, as she was teaching a small class of young students, a little boy raised his hand and asked, "Miss Lila, Do you ever get scared before you play? She smiled softly. Sometimes, she said. But I've learned that being scared just means what you're doing matters to you. The boy nodded thoughtfully, then went back to practicing. Lila watched him for a moment and felt a quiet happiness bloom in her heart. That night, after everyone had gone, she sat alone at the piano once again. The building was empty, the sound of her playing echoing gently through the hallways. It was peaceful. She thought about how far she'd come, from the frightened girl who once wanted to quit, to the woman who now lived her dream. She realized that her journey had never been about reaching perfection. It had always been about learning to believe in herself. She played her father's song one last time, letting each note linger. When she finished, she smiled and whispered, "Thank you." Outside, the night was calm. The stars shimmered like tiny lights above the academy. Lila stood by the window looking out, feeling both small and infinite at the same time. Her story wasn't over. It was just changing. New music, new students, new dreams. They were all waiting for her. And as she turned off the lights and closed the door behind her, the soft echo of her last note hung in the air, gentle, lasting, and full of life.